You know that moment when your whole world just crumbles? When the person you die for looks you in the eye and tells you you're nothing? I'm about to tell you the hardest story I've ever lived through. 2 days ago, my own daughter, my baby girl, threw me out of her house like I was some stranger off the street. But what happened after those 67 missed calls? Well, that changed everything. I never thought I'd be telling this story to strangers on the internet, but here I am, sitting in my empty apartment, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what just happened to my family. My name is Linda, and I'm 58 years old. For the past 35 years, I've been a mother first, everything else second. And 2 days ago, my daughter Sarah kicked me out of her house in Malibu. Just like that. After everything I've sacrificed for her. Let me back up a little, because this story doesn't start 2 days ago. It starts 35 years ago, when I was 23 and holding this tiny, perfect baby in my arms for the first time. Sarah's father. God, I can barely say his name anymore. David left us when she was just 8 months old. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. Wasn't ready for the responsibility. So there I was, a single mom in Los Angeles, working 3 jobs just to keep our little apartment in Van Nuys. I remember those early years so clearly. The smell of baby formula at 3 in the morning. The way Sarah would grip my finger with her tiny hand while she slept. The sound of her first laugh when she was 6 months old. I used to sit in that old rocking chair my mom gave me, holding Sarah close, whispering promises to her in the dark. I'll never let anything hurt you, baby girl. I'd whisper into her soft hair, Mommy's going to make sure you have everything I never had. And I meant it. Every single word. I dropped out of college to work full-time. Gave up my dreams of becoming a teacher. Spent my 20s working as a waitress at 3 different restaurants. Coming home with sore feet and grease-stained uniforms. But always with enough money to buy Sarah new shoes when she outgrew the old ones. When she turned 5, I remember taking her to Disneyland for the first time. I'd been saving for 8 months, putting away $10 here, $20 there. Skipping meals so I could afford those tickets. The look on her face when she saw Cinderella's castle. I took about 50 pictures that day with that old disposable camera I had. Mommy, it's like a fairy tale, she said, tugging on my hand as we walked through the park. Everything's going to be a fairy tale for you, sweetheart, I told her. Mommy's going to make sure of it. I kept every report card, every drawing she made in school, every little craft project. Our refrigerator was covered with her artwork, held up by those little Disney magnets I'd buy her every time we went to the grocery store. When Sarah was 12, she got into this fancy private school in Beverly Hills. The tuition was $15,000 a year. $15,000. I was making maybe $30,000 total, working 60 hours a week between the diner and the catering company. But I found a way. I always found a way. I took out loans, worked weekends cleaning houses in the rich neighborhoods, sold my car and took the bus everywhere for 2 years so I could afford those tuition payments. I remember sitting at my kitchen table at midnight, surrounded by bills, trying to figure out how to make the math work. Sarah would come downstairs sometimes, rubbing her eyes. Mom, why are you still up? Just taking care of some paperwork, honey. Go back to bed. She never knew how close we came to losing everything. How many nights I stayed awake wondering if I was doing the right thing, if all these sacrifices would be worth it someday. But watching her graduate from that school, seeing her walk across that stage in her cap and gown, knowing she was going to get into a good college, it felt worth it. Every sleepless night, every extra shift, Every time I said no to something I wanted so I could say yes to something she needed. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said that night, hugging me tight after the ceremony. "I know you sacrificed a lot for me." I cried right there in front of all those other families. Just completely broke down. "You're my whole world, Sarah," I whispered into her hair, just like I used to when she was a baby. "Everything I do is for you." College was the next mountain to climb. Sarah got into USC, full ride scholarship. Thank God. But there were still books, housing, all those little expenses that add up. I kept working, kept sending her money whenever she needed it. She called me almost every day that first semester, homesick, struggling with her classes, missing my cooking. "Mom, I don't know if I can do this," she said one night, crying over the phone. It was October, and I could hear the loneliness in her voice. "Baby, you're the strongest person I know," I told her, sitting in my own empty apartment, missing her just as much. "You can do anything. Look how far you've already come. But what if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough?" "Sarah Marie, you listen to me." I used her full name, the way I did when she was little and needed to hear something important. "You are brilliant. You are capable. And you have something most of these other kids don't have." "What's that?" "You've seen what it looks like when someone fights for their dreams. You've watched me work for everything we have. That's going to make you stronger than any of them." She graduated magna cum laude with a degree in marketing. I drove down to Los Angeles for her graduation, wearing the same dress I'd worn to her high school graduation because I couldn't afford a new one. But I didn't care. I was so proud I thought I might burst. After college, Sarah got a job at this big advertising firm in West Hollywood. Started making good money, more than I'd ever made in my life. She moved into this beautiful apartment in Santa Monica, and I remember the first time she showed it to me. "Look at this view, Mom," she said, opening the sliding glass door to her balcony. "You could see the ocean from there, stretching out forever under the California sun. It's beautiful." "Honey," I said, but I was looking at her, not the ocean. My little girl, all grown up, successful, independent. Everything I dreamed of for her. For the first few years, things were good between us. She'd call me every few days, come visit me in my little apartment in Riverside, where I'd moved after she graduated to be closer to her, but still afford rent on my waitressing salary. Then she met James. James was, well, he was everything I'd wanted for Sarah, and everything I was afraid of, all at the same time. He was successful, handsome, came from money. His family owned some kind of tech company up in San Francisco. The kind of guy who wore suits that cost more than I made into months. The first time Sarah brought him to meet me, I could tell he was uncomfortable in my apartment. The way he looked around, trying not to touch anything. The way he smiled politely when I served dinner on my everyday dishes instead of fancy china. "So, Mrs. Patterson," he said, sitting stiffly on my old couch, "Sarah tells me you work in the restaurant business." "I'm a waitress," I said simply. No point in dressing it up. Have been for most of Sarah's life. He nodded like he was trying to process this information, like he couldn't quite understand how his successful girlfriend had come from such humble beginnings. But Sarah was happy. That's all that mattered to me. She was glowing whenever she talked about him, planning their future together. They got engaged after dating for 2 years, and I remember how she called me, breathless with excitement. "Mom," he proposed. "We're getting married." "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. even though something in my gut was already worried about how different their worlds were. The wedding. God, the wedding. It was everything Sarah had dreamed of as a little girl. Beach ceremony in Malibu, 300 guests. Flowers that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. James's family flew in from San Francisco, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I felt so out of place that day. I'd bought a dress from JCPenney, got my hair done at the local salon where I'd been going for 15 years. But standing next to James's mother, with her designer everything and her perfect manicure, I felt like exactly what I was. The working-class mom who'd somehow raised a daughter who belonged in this world. But when Sarah walked down that aisle, none of that mattered. She was radiant, beautiful, everything I'd ever wanted for her. "You did good, Linda," my sister Carol whispered to me as we watched Sarah say her vows. "Look at her. Look at what you raised." I couldn't even respond. I was crying too hard. The first few years of Sarah's marriage were different. She and James moved into this huge house in Malibu. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, a view of the Pacific that took your breath away. I remember the first time I visited them there. "Mom, come see the guest room we set up for you," Sarah said, leading me up this curved staircase that probably cost more than my entire apartment. The guest room was bigger than my living room and kitchen combined. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a bathroom with a soaking tub, a walk-in closet that was completely empty except for some extra hangers. "This is... wow, Sarah," I managed to say. "It's beautiful. I want you to feel comfortable here, Mom. I want you to visit all the time." But comfortable was the last thing I felt. Everything in that house was white or cream or some shade of beige I didn't even have a name for. I was terrified to touch anything, afraid I'd leave fingerprints or somehow damage something that probably cost more than I made in a year. James was polite to me, don't get me wrong. He never said anything directly rude, but there were these little moments, like when I offered to help in the kitchen during their first dinner party, and he quickly said, "Oh, that's okay, Linda. The caterers have everything handled." Or when I mentioned wanting to take Sarah out for lunch at this little Mexican place we used to go to when she was in high school, and he suggested this expensive restaurant in Beverly Hills instead. "Somewhere more appropriate," he said with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. Sarah started changing too. Slowly at first, so slowly I almost didn't notice. She stopped calling as often. When we did talk, she seemed distracted, always mentioning some charity event or business dinner or weekend trip to Napa Valley. "I miss our Sunday dinners," I said one day when she called to cancel our weekly lunch date for the 3rd time in a month. "I know, Mom. I'm just so busy with everything. James has these work obligations, and his family expects us at all these functions." His family, I repeated. "What about your family?" "You know what I mean, Mom. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. That word hit me like a slap. I'd never been dramatic. I'd been practical, hardworking, always putting her needs first. When had caring about spending time with my daughter become dramatic? Things got worse when Sarah got pregnant with her first child, my grandson Michael. I was so excited to be a grandmother, to help her the way my own mother had helped me when Sarah was born. But James's mother, Patricia, swooped in like she owned the place. She planned the baby shower, picked out the nursery furniture, even hired the nanny before Sarah gave birth. "Mom, Patricia has such good taste," Sarah said when I mentioned that I'd love to help set up the nursery. "She's been through this before with James's sister. She knows all the best brands. The best brands. Like love was something you could buy at a high-end store." When Michael was born, I'll never forget holding him for the first time. This tiny, perfect little boy who looked just like Sarah had as a baby. I was sitting in the hospital room, rocking him gently, when Patricia walked in. "Oh," she said, like she was surprised to see me there. "I didn't realize. I brought some things for the baby." She had bags and bags of stuff. Expensive onesies, organic everything, toys that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "That's very generous," I said, trying to be polite. "Well, we want only the best for our grandson," she said, emphasizing the word "our" just enough to make it clear that she considered herself more of a grandmother than I was. I spent the next 3 years watching from the sidelines as Patricia became Michael's primary grandmother. She took him to his first swimming lessons, his first music class, bought him his first tricycle. When they went on family vacations, it was always to visit James's parents in San Francisco. Never to see me. I saw Michael maybe once a month, if I was lucky. Usually when Sarah needed a babysitter and Patricia wasn't available. "Mom, can you watch Michael tonight? Patricia's at some fundraiser, and we have this dinner we can't miss." I always said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my grandson, and those few hours with him were precious to me. We'd read stories and play with blocks, and I'd tell him about when his mommy was a little girl. "Grandma Linda, tell me about mommy when she was my age," he'd say, curled up in my lap. Well, I'd begin, stroking his dark hair. "Your mommy was the smartest, bravest little girl I ever knew. She used to help me cook dinner every night, standing on a little stool so she could reach the counter. But even those moments felt borrowed, like I was just the backup grandmother, the one they called when the real grandmother wasn't available." Then Sarah had Emma, my granddaughter, and somehow things got even worse. I remember the day Emma was born. I was so excited to meet her, to hold this new little person who carried part of me in her DNA. But when I got to the hospital, Patricia was already there, holding Emma like she owned her. "Isn't she perfect?" Patricia cooed, not even looking up when I walked into the room. "She has the Williams family nose. And look at those long fingers. She's going to be a pianist, just like her great-grandmother." The Williams family, James's family. Like Emma didn't have any of my genes, any of Sarah's features, any connection to the woman who had raised her mother from nothing. As the kids got older, the distance between Sarah and me grew wider. She stopped asking me to babysit. When I called to check in, she'd have 5 minutes to talk before she had to rush off to some appointment or activity. "Mom, I can't talk long. I'm taking Emma to her ballet lesson, and then Michael has soccer practice. Maybe I could come watch one of his games sometime." I'd suggest. "Maybe. We'll see." These parents are also, well, you know, it's a different crowd. A different crowd. Translation: I didn't belong there either. I started feeling like a stranger in my own daughter's life, like I was somehow embarrassing to her. This working-class woman who didn't fit into her new world of country clubs and charity galas. The breaking point came 3 months ago. Sarah called me, crying, "Mom, I need to talk to someone. James and we're having problems." My heart broke for her, but part of me was also relieved. Finally, she needed me again. Finally, I could be her mother, the person she came to when things got tough. "Come over, sweetheart," I said. "I'll make some tea, and we can talk." She came to my apartment that afternoon, looking exhausted and defeated. We sat on my old couch, the same one where I used to hold her when she had nightmares as a little girl. "He's cheating on me, Mom," she said, the words coming out in a broken whisper. I felt my whole world stop. What? I found emails, text messages. He's been seeing his assistant for months. I held her while she cried, stroking her hair the way I used to when she was small. All those years of feeling like an outsider in her marriage. And this was why. James wasn't the perfect husband I'd tried to convince myself he was. What are you going to do? I asked gently. I don't know. The kids. Our life. Everything we've built together. Sarah, listen to me, I said, pulling back to look at her tear-streaked face. You're strong. You're stronger than you know. You can get through this. But how? How do I start over? How do I raise two kids on my own, the same way I did? I said simply, one day at a time, with love and determination, and the knowledge that your children are worth any sacrifice. For a moment, she looked at me like she was really seeing me for the first time in years. Like she remembered who I was, what I'd done for her. You're right, she said softly. You did it. You raised me all by yourself and look how I turned out. You turned out perfect, I whispered. You're everything I dreamed you'd be. We talked for hours that day. She told me about the loneliness in her marriage, how James had become distant and cold, how she'd felt like she was performing in her own life instead of living it. I miss our old relationship, Mom, she said before she left. I miss talking to you every day. I miss feeling like you were proud of me. I've never stopped being proud of you. I told her, not for one single day. She left that evening with a plan. She was going to confront James, demand marriage counseling, fight for her family. I was so proud of her courage, so hopeful that maybe this crisis would bring us closer together again. But that's not what happened. 2 weeks later, she called to tell me she'd decided to work things out with James. He said he'd end it with his assistant, she explained. He wants to save our marriage. For the kids. And what do you want? I asked. There was a long pause. I want my family to stay together. I should have been supportive. I should have told her I'd stand by whatever decision she made. But something in her voice, something told me this wasn't really what she wanted. This was what she thought she should want. Sarah, are you sure? You don't have to settle for Mom, please, she interrupted. This is my decision, my family. I need you to respect that. Her family, like I wasn't part of it. After Sarah decided to stay with James, things between us got strange. She'd call me sometimes, usually when she was driving somewhere, and we'd talk for a few minutes about surface-level things. The weather, the kids' activities, never about anything real. I could hear the sadness in her voice, could tell she was just going through the motions in her marriage. But whenever I tried to ask how she was really doing, she'd change the subject. I'm fine, Mom. Everything's fine. But I knew my daughter. I'd raised her from the moment she took her first breath. I could hear the lie in those words. Then, about a month ago, she invited me to Emma's 8th birthday party, the first family event I'd been invited to in over a year. It's just going to be a small thing, she said. Family and a few of Emma's friends from school. I was so excited. I went to Target and spent way more than I should have on a present for Emma. This beautiful art set with colored pencils and watercolors and a pad of paper. Emma had always loved to draw, just like Sarah had when she was little. I drove out to Malibu that Saturday afternoon, my stomach full of butterflies. I was finally going to see my grandchildren, spend time with Sarah, be part of the family again. But when I walked into that house, it was like stepping into a magazine spread. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. There were professional decorations, a catered lunch, and about 20 kids running around the backyard while their parents stood in clusters. drinking wine and talking about private schools and vacation homes. I felt underdressed in my best slacks and blouse from Kohl's. Everyone else looked like they'd stepped off a yacht. Linda. Patricia appeared beside me with that fake smile she always wore. How lovely that you could make it. Wouldn't miss my granddaughter's birthday, I said, trying to match her tone. Of course not. Emma's such a special girl. We're so proud of her piano progress. Her teacher says she has real talent. Piano lessons I didn't even know Emma was taking. Another thing I'd been left out of. I found Emma by the pool, surrounded by friends, opening presents. When she saw me, her face lit up in that way that reminded me so much of Sarah at that age. Grandma Linda, she squealed, running over to hug me. My heart nearly exploded with love for this little girl. This beautiful, smart, funny child who somehow still remembered that I existed. Happy birthday. Sweetheart, I said, hugging her tight. I brought you something special. I gave her the art set, and she was genuinely excited. She opened it right there, running her fingers over the colored pencils like they were precious jewels. Mom, look what Grandma Linda got me. She called to Sarah. Sarah came over, that polite smile on her face that I'd learned to recognize over the years. The smile that meant she was being appropriate, not genuine. That's very nice, Mom, she said. What do you say, Emma? Thank you, Grandma Linda. Can we draw together? Maybe later, sweetie, Sarah said quickly. You should go play with your friends now. Emma ran off, clutching the art set, and I was left standing there with Sarah. The distance between us feeling like an ocean. She's beautiful, I said. They both are. I don't get to see them enough. I know, Mom. Things are just busy. Sarah, I started, lowering my voice so the other parents couldn't hear. Can we talk? Really talk? I feel like I barely know what's going on in your life anymore. For just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw the sadness there, the loneliness. But then James appeared, putting his arm around her waist in a gesture that looked more possessive than loving. Linda, he said with that practiced smile. Thanks for coming. Sarah, the Hendersons want to say goodbye. And just like that, she was pulled away from me again. I spent the rest of the party standing awkwardly by the snack table, watching my grandchildren play, feeling like an intruder in their lives. When it was time to leave, Sarah walked me to my car. Thanks for coming, Mom, she said. It meant a lot to Emma. What about to you? I asked. Did it mean anything to you? She looked at me for a long moment, and I thought she might finally say something real, something honest. Instead, she just hugged me goodbye. Drive safe, Mom. That was a month ago, the last normal conversation we had before everything fell apart. Asterisk 2 days ago started like any other Tuesday. I was getting ready for my shift at the diner, checking my phone to see if Sarah had maybe sent a text or called. She hadn't, but that wasn't unusual anymore. Then my phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen. Hi, honey, I answered, surprised to hear from her mid-morning. How are you? But the voice that came through the phone wasn't my daughter. It was Emma. Grandma Linda, she said, and she sounded scared. Can you come over? Mommy and Daddy are fighting really bad. My heart dropped into my stomach. Sweetheart, where's your mommy? She locked herself in the bathroom. Daddy's yelling and throwing things. Michael's hiding in his room and I don't know what to do. I was already grabbing my car keys. I'm coming right now, Emma. Go to your room and lock the door, okay? I'll be there in 30 minutes. I called Sarah's phone while I was driving, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried calling James, but same thing. So I just drove faster than I should have, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, praying that my grandchildren were okay. When I pulled into their driveway, the house looked normal from the outside. Perfect landscaping, expensive cars in the driveway, no sign of the chaos Emma had described. But I could hear yelling as soon as I got out of my car. I used the key Sarah had given me years ago for emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. The scene inside was, God, it was awful. There was a broken vase in the entryway, and I could hear James's voice coming from upstairs, loud and angry. You have no right to go through my phone. No right. It's my house too. Sarah's voice, raw with crying. My marriage too. I found Emma huddled in the living room, clutching that art set I'd given her at her birthday party. She ran to me as soon as she saw me. Grandma Linda. I was so scared, she whispered, burying her face in my shoulder. It's okay, sweetheart, I said, holding her tight. Grandma's here now. Where's Michael? In his room with his headphones on. I went upstairs, Emma clinging to my hand. The yelling had stopped, but I could hear Sarah crying behind the master bedroom door. Sarah? I called softly. It's Mom. I'm here. The door opened, and my heart broke at the sight of my daughter. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair disheveled, her hands shaking. Mom, she whispered, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, needing me to fix everything. What happened, baby? I found more messages, she said, her voice barely audible. He never stopped seeing her. He's been lying to me for months. James appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair messed up. This is a private matter, Linda, he said coldly, between my wife and me. Those are my grandchildren downstairs, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. And they're terrified. This stops now. You don't get to come into my house and tell me how to handle my family. He snapped. Your family? I felt something inside me snap. Sarah is my daughter. Those children are my grandchildren. They called me because they were scared, and I came because that's what family does. Mom, please, Sarah said quietly. Don't make this worse. But I couldn't stop. All those years of feeling like an outsider, all those times I'd bitten my tongue, all the ways this man had made me feel less than. It all came pouring out. Make it worse? I said, Sarah, look at yourself. Look at your children. This man has been lying to you, cheating on you, and you're worried about making things worse. That's enough, James said, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah, tell your mother to leave. I'm not going anywhere until I know my grandchildren are safe. I said, they're perfectly safe, he replied. What they don't need is their grandmother filling their mother's head with poison. Poison? I'm telling her the truth. Something you apparently don't know how to do. Mom, stop, Sarah said, but her voice was weak. Defeated. No, Sarah, I won't stop. I've been stopping for years. I've watched you become a shadow of yourself in this marriage. I've watched you push away everyone who really loves you. And for what? For him? James stepped toward me, and I saw something ugly in his eyes. You need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving without my daughter and grandchildren. Yes, you are, he said, because this is my house, and you're not welcome here. That's when Sarah, my own daughter, the little girl I'd sacrificed everything for, said the words that broke my heart into a million pieces. Mom, please just go. I stared at my daughter for a long moment, hoping I'd heard her wrong, hoping she'd look at me and say she needed me, that she wanted me to stay and help her figure this out. But she wouldn't even meet my eyes. Sarah. I said softly. You don't have to do this alone. Let me help you. I need you to leave, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Fine, James said, crossing his arms. You heard her. Time to go. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. This woman I'd raised from birth, who I'd worked 3 jobs to support, who I'd sacrificed my dreams for. She was choosing him. Again, even after everything he'd done to her. 40 years, I said quietly. 40 years I've been your mother. I held you when you cried. I worked myself to the bone to give you opportunities I never had. I put your needs before mine every single day of my life. Sarah finally looked at me then, and I saw tears in her eyes. But she didn't say anything. And this is how it ends? I continued. You're going to choose the man who's been cheating on you over the mother who's never done anything but love you? It's not that simple, Mom, she said. It's exactly that simple, I replied. Love is simple. Loyalty is simple. Family is simple. But you've forgotten what family means. I turned to leave, then stopped at the bedroom door. When you figure out what really matters, I said without looking back. You know where to find me. I walked downstairs, my legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Emma was still in the living room, and when she saw me, she ran over. Are you leaving? Grandma Linda. I knelt down to her level, trying not to cry in front of this innocent little girl. Yes, sweetheart. I have to go. But why? I want you to stay. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, I said, smoothing her hair. But I want you to remember something, okay? No matter what happens, Grandma Linda loves you and Michael more than anything in the whole world. Don't ever forget that. I won't, she whispered, hugging me tight. Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, his headphones around his neck. Grandma, are you okay? I'm okay, sweetheart, I lied. Take care of your sister, okay? Be brave. He nodded solemnly, too young to understand what was really happening but old enough to know it was serious. I walked out of that house, that beautiful, perfect house that had never really felt like home, and got in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. I drove. I don't even remember where. Just drove around Malibu, then down the coast, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch out endlessly beside me. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been beautiful but just made me feel more empty. Eventually, I ended up at a little diner in Santa Monica, the kind of place I used to take Sarah when she was little. When we didn't have much money but we'd splurge on pancakes and hot chocolate on Sunday mornings. I sat in a booth by the window, ordered a cup of coffee I didn't really want, and tried to process what had just happened. My daughter had chosen her cheating husband over me. She'd asked me to leave her children, my grandchildren, when they needed protection most. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made over the years, all the dreams I'd given up, all the times I'd put her needs first. Had any of it mattered? Had any of it meant anything to her? The waitress, a woman about my age with kind eyes, refilled my coffee cup. You okay, hun? She asked gently. I almost started crying right there. This stranger was showing me more kindness than my own daughter had. Just having a hard day, I managed to say. We all have those, she replied. But tomorrow's a new day. Things have a way of working out. I wished I could believe her. I stayed in that diner until they closed at midnight, then drove to a motel nearby. I couldn't face going home to my empty apartment. Couldn't face the silence and the memories and the reality of what had happened. I lay awake all night in that sterile motel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 35 years, wondering where I'd gone wrong, wondering how the little girl who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms had become a woman who could turn her back on me so easily. The next day, I finally went home. The apartment felt different somehow, smaller, more lonely than it had ever been. I looked at the pictures on my walls, dozens of photos of Sarah growing up, of her graduation, her wedding, my grandchildren. Had I been living in a fantasy? Had I convinced myself we were closer than we really were? My phone sat silent on the kitchen table. No calls, no texts, no apology. That's when the hurt started turning into something else. Something harder. Anger, maybe. Or just disappointment so deep it felt like grief. I'd lost my daughter, not to death, but to something almost worse. To indifference, to a life where I no longer had a place. But I had no idea at all, that this was just the beginning. Asterisk. Yesterday morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. For just a moment, still half asleep, I thought it might be Sarah calling to apologize, to say she'd made a mistake. But it wasn't Sarah. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. After what had happened, I wasn't sure I had the energy to talk to anyone. But something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Linda Patterson? The voice was young, professional. Yes, this is Linda, Mrs. Patterson. My name is Amanda Chen. I'm a family therapist here in Los Angeles. Your daughter Sarah gave me your number. My heart started pounding. Is everything okay? Are the children? The children are fine, she said quickly. But Sarah has asked me to facilitate a conversation between the two of you. She says there are some things that need to be discussed. I sat down heavily on my couch. She wants to talk to me. She does. But she's requested that it happen in a neutral environment, with professional mediation. Would you be willing to come in today? Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me was still too hurt, too angry to even consider sitting in a room with Sarah after what she'd put me through. But the other part, the part that was still her mother, couldn't say no to any chance of fixing this. What time? I asked. This afternoon, if you're available. 2:00. I spent the rest of the morning getting ready, changing clothes 3 times, practicing what I might say, but nothing could have prepared me for walking into that therapist's office and seeing Sarah sitting there. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying for days. Hello, Sarah, I said quietly, taking the chair across from her. Hi, Mom. Her voice was so small, so broken. Amanda, the therapist, was a petite Asian woman with a calm, reassuring presence. She explained how the session would work, set some ground rules, and then asked Sarah to begin. I asked you here, Sarah said, her hands twisted in her lap, because I realized I said some things the other day that I can't take back. But I need you to understand why I said them. I'm listening, I said, though every muscle in my body was tense. When you came to the house, when you saw James and me fighting, it brought back all these memories from when I was little. When Dad left, all those nights I could hear you crying in your room, thinking I was asleep. I felt my breath catch. I thought I'd hidden that from her. I remember being 8 years old and finding you at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by bills, crying because you didn't know how we were going to pay rent. Sarah, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I remember making a promise to myself that night, that I would never, ever put my children through what I went through. That I would never let them see their parents fight like that. That I would never let them feel scared and helpless and poor. The word hung in the air between us like an accusation. So when you came to my house the other day, she continued, and you started telling me to leave James. All I could think about was Michael and Emma hearing us fight, about them feeling the way I felt when I was little. They were already scared, I said gently. They called me because they were scared. I know, she whispered. I know they were. But, Mom, you don't understand. If I leave James, I lose everything. The house, the financial security, the children's schools, everything. You'd have your self-respect, I said. You'd have your dignity. She laughed bitterly. Dignity doesn't pay for private school. Self-respect doesn't keep a roof over my children's heads. Sarah, I raised you as a single mother with nothing but love and determination. And you turned out fine, did I? She asked, looking at me directly for the first time. Did I really turn out fine, Mom? Because sitting here right now, having this conversation, I don't feel fine. I feel like I've been running away from poverty my whole life, and I'm terrified that if I make one wrong move, I'll end up back there. Amanda gently intervened. Sarah, can you help your mother understand what you mean by that? Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue. Mom, do you remember when I was 16 and I wanted to go on that school trip to Europe? Of course. We couldn't afford it. Do you remember what you said when I asked? I tried to think back. It had been so long ago. I said maybe we could save up for something like that later. You said, baby, that's not for people like us. People like us, Mom. Like being poor was just who we were. Like it was genetic or something. I felt like she'd slapped me. Sarah, I was trying to be realistic. I didn't want to get your hopes up. I know that's what you thought you were doing. But what I heard was that there were things I could never have, places I could never go, just because of where I came from. And I swore I would never be in that position again. So you married James, I said quietly. For financial security? No, Sarah said, shaking her head. I married James because I loved him, because I thought he loved me. But I stayed with him even when that love started to fade because I was terrified of being alone, of being poor again. Amanda leaned forward slightly. Sarah, what would you like your mother to understand about your decision to stay in your marriage? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I want her to understand that I'm not brave like she was. I don't have her strength. I can't face starting over with nothing. But you wouldn't have nothing, I said. You'd have me. You'd have your education, your skills, your intelligence, Mom, she interrupted. I'd have a marketing degree and no recent work experience. I've been out of the workforce for 10 years. James's lawyer would destroy me in court. He'd get custody of the kids, or at least joint custody, and I'd be lucky to see them half the time. How do you know that if you haven't even tried? Because I've consulted with 3 different lawyers, Mom. Because I've been planning this for months. Because I'm not as naive as you think I am. This was news to me. You've been planning what? To leave him, she said simply. But every lawyer I talk to tells me the same thing. California is a community property state, but James has been hiding assets. His family has connections. I might get the house, but he'd get the kids. And I'd rather stay in a loveless marriage than lose my children. I felt my world shifting. Sarah, why didn't you tell me any of this? Because every time I try to talk to you about my problems, you have a solution. And your solutions always involve me being as strong as you were. But I'm not you, Mom. I'm not that brave. You're the bravest person I know, I said, tears starting to flow. You're my daughter. No, I'm not brave. A brave person would have left James the first time I caught him cheating. A brave person wouldn't have spent the last 2 days calling you 67 times because she was too scared to face what she'd done. I stared at her. 67 times. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me the call log. Call after call to my number, starting the night I left her house and continuing through yesterday morning. You didn't answer, she whispered. I called, and you didn't answer. My heart broke all over again. Sarah, I had my phone on silent. After what happened, I couldn't. I needed time to think. I thought you hated me, she said, crying openly now. I thought I'd lost you forever. You could never lose me, I said, reaching across the space between us to take her hand. I'm your mother. That doesn't change, no matter what. Amanda spoke gently. Sarah, what do you need from your mother right now? I need her to understand that I was wrong to ask her to leave. I was scared and confused, and I took it out on the one person who's always been there for me. But I also need her to understand that I can't just walk away from my marriage without a plan, without knowing my children will be safe. I squeezed her hand. Then let's make a plan. Together. You'd do that. After everything I said to you? Sarah, I've been making plans for your future since the day you were born. I'm not going to stop now. We spent the next hour talking. Really talking, maybe for the first time in years. Sarah told me about the lawyers she'd consulted, the evidence she'd been gathering about James's affairs, the prenup she'd signed that left her with very little leverage. But she also told me about a job opportunity. A former colleague had reached out about a position at a marketing firm in San Diego. It would mean starting over, moving the kids, but it would also mean independence. I'm scared, Mom, she admitted. What if I can't do it? What if I fail? Then you'll figure it out, I said, just like I did, just like millions of other single mothers have done. You're not alone in this, Sarah. You never were. When we left the therapist's office that day, something had shifted between us. We weren't completely healed. There was still hurt on both sides, still things to work through. But we were talking again. We were mother and daughter again. Mom, Sarah said as we walked to our cars, would you come to dinner Sunday? I want Michael and Emma to see their grandmother. I want them to know that family doesn't give up on each other, even if James is there. She straightened her shoulders, and for the first time in years, I saw the strong, determined little girl I'd raised, especially if James is there. It's time he understood that you're part of this family, and you always will be. That night, I finally listened to all 67 voicemails Sarah had left. They started angry, then became desperate, then heartbroken, and finally, they became the voice of my daughter asking for help. Mom, please call me back. I know I hurt you, but I need you. I've always needed you. I just forgot how to ask. Sunday dinner was interesting. James tried to be polite, but I could see the tension in his jaw every time I spoke to the children. Sarah had clearly had words with him, because he didn't make any of his usual subtle digs about my background or my clothes. Michael and Emma were so happy to see me. Emma showed me all the drawings she'd made with the art set I gave her, and Michael told me about his soccer team making it to the championships. Grandma Linda, will you come watch my game next Saturday? He asked. I wouldn't miss it, I said, looking directly at James as I answered it after dinner. Sarah walked me to my car. I have news, she said. I got the job in San Diego. I'm taking it. What about James? The kids. I told James yesterday that I want a divorce. A real one this time, not just threats. I hired a new lawyer, one who specializes in cases like mine. She thinks we have a good chance of getting joint custody, especially with all the evidence I've gathered about his affairs. I felt so proud of her I thought I might burst. When do you start? Next month. The kids will finish out the school year here, then move with me over the summer. It's going to be hard, Mom. Really hard. But I can't teach my children that it's okay to accept being treated badly just because it's easier than fighting back. You're going to be amazing, I told her. You're stronger than you know. She hugged me then. Really hugged me, the way she used to when she was little and the world felt scary. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, for pushing you away, for making you feel like you weren't important, for forgetting that everything I am is because of what you gave me. We both made mistakes, I said, but we're family. That means we forgive each other and move forward. 3 months later, I helped Sarah pack up her life in Malibu. James had agreed to a settlement that gave Sarah primary custody and enough money to start fresh. He'd keep the house, but Sarah would keep the children as we loaded boxes into the moving truck. Emma found a photo that had fallen out of one of the albums. It was a picture of Sarah and me from her high school graduation, both of us crying happy tears. Mommy, why are you both crying in this picture? Emma asked. Sarah looked at the photo, then at me, then back at her daughter. Because sometimes, she said, the best moments in life are so beautiful they make you cry. That was one of those moments. Are you going to cry when we move to our new house? Emma asked. Probably, Sarah admitted. But they'll be good tears. The kind that mean new beginnings. Last week, I drove down to San Diego to visit Sarah in her new apartment. It's smaller than the Malibu house, but it feels like home in a way that mansion never did. The walls are covered with Emma's artwork. Michael's soccer trophies are on the bookshelf. And there's a photo of 3 generations of women. My mother, me, and Sarah, on the mantel. Do you ever regret it? I asked Sarah as we sat on her balcony, watching the sunset over the Pacific, leaving James. Never. Not for 1 second. Even though things are harder now? Even though you're starting over. She smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her in years. Mom, do you remember what you used to tell me? When I was little and I was scared of trying something new. Tell me. You'd say, Sarah, brave isn't about not being scared. Brave is about doing what's right even when you are scared. I finally understand what you meant. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves crash against the shore. My daughter had found her way back to herself, back to the values I'd tried to teach her. She'd found her way back to me. I love you, Mom, she said quietly. I love you too, baby girl. I always have. I always will. And sitting there in the California sunshine, surrounded by the sound of my grandchildren playing inside, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't about perfect families or perfect lives. Sometimes they're about broken people finding their way back to each other. Sometimes they're about forgiveness. Sometimes they're about learning that love isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. And sometimes they're about discovering that being a mother means never giving up on your child, even when your child gives up on you. Because that's what mothers do. We love, we forgive, we fight for our families, and we never, ever give up. That's my story. The hardest thing I've ever lived through, and the most beautiful ending I could have asked for. Because sometimes When your whole world falls apart, that's when you discover what really matters. Family, forgiveness, and the kind of love that never lets go, no matter what.